亲爱的腾讯文化网友们，你们好！非常感谢你们今天来到纽约曼哈顿的亚洲艺术博物馆。在我这里的是博洛施女士，她是亚洲艺术馆的传统艺术的主策展人。今天请到了她，将带领着我们参观大海的秘密和唐代的沉船和早期的亚洲的一个贸易。
Hi, Xiaoming. So happy to be here with you today. This exhibition, Secrets of the Sea, a Tang Shipwreck and Early Trade in Asia, is a show that is going to be on view here at Asia Society through early June. And it is an exhibition that we have been working on for the past year together with the Asian Civilizations Museum in Singapore.
非常高兴呢，今天同我在一起给大家介绍这个唐代沉船和早期的亚洲的这个海上贸易的一个展览。这个展览呢，一直到亚洲协会在6月份。这个展览是和新加坡的文化机构合作的，是新加坡的一个文化美术馆。
The lender to this exhibition is the Asian Civilizations Museum in Singapore. So everything in Secrets of the Sea is on loan to us from that museum. And we're very excited to have those loans here because it's the first time in the United States that we have loans from this shipwreck or cargo from the shipwreck on view here in the United States.
这个展览的全部的作品呢，来自于新加坡的亚洲文化博物馆。这里的所有的这些作品呢，也是他们介绍给我们的。所以呢，非常高兴亚洲协会有机会和新加坡的文化机构进行这样的一个合作。
So let's move over to the map now.
我们现在呢，看一下那里的一个地图。
Should I just start?
Yeah. Yes.
So this exhibition is an exhibition of objects that come from the middle of the 9th century. They were all objects that were on a ship that set sail at around that time.
这里的所展出的这些展品呢，来自于9世纪的中期。那个时候呢，这个船呢已经到了一个中东，所以呢，这些展品呢都是来自于那个船上的。
So a little bit of history. This period of time is the time when there were 3 major empires in Asia, and of course, all of you will know the Tang Dynasty from China.
在这个时候呢，一共有3个皇朝。我们知道的其中的最重要的一个皇朝呢，就是唐代的这个唐朝。
But in West Asia, there was also the Abbasid Empire.
在这个亚洲的西部呢，也有阿巴斯的这个皇朝。
And it included Iran and Iraq and a lot of the Arab world.
那也包括很多的阿拉伯的国家，像伊朗啊、伊拉克啊等等周边的。
And then in Southeast Asia, there was the Srivijaya Empire.
在这个东南亚呢，有那个舍利扎雅这整个的皇朝。
And Srivijaya was also a great shipping trade empire in the region.
舍利扎亚的这个皇朝呢，也对这个海上的贸易呢起到了一个非常重要的一个作用。
So we know that this ship was a ship that originated in West Asia. It was obviously a ship that belonged to the Abbasid Empire.
这个船呢，是它的起源于呢，来自这个西边，在这个阿巴斯的这个皇朝。
So we know it must have been carrying goods and then sailed by Southeast Asia through India and then through Southeast Asia and finally arrived in Guangzhou at the port.
这个阿巴斯王朝的这个船呢，它应该是从阿巴斯王朝那儿的这个海湾开始的，一直到了这个印度洋，包括去了印度及东南亚的另外一个这个Java 这个王朝，最后呢到了中国的这个广州。
It's also possible that the ship went to Yangzhou as well, but we're not certain if that happened. But we do know for sure that cargo would have been taken off the ship, cargo that came from the Abbasid Empire, and then Chinese objects would have been loaded onto the ship.
我们也可能呢在怀疑这个船呢有可能去了再往上走去了中国的扬州，但是肯定这个船在靠岸的时候呢，有很多中国的这些物品呢也被送上了这些船上。
Clearly, because there were about 70,000 objects on the ship when they discovered it.
在他们发现这个沉船的时候呢，发现了7万多件不同的这些东西。
There was a tremendous amount of cargo that was loaded on in China, including many Chinese ceramics.
所以呢，我们当时看到呢，是在中国呢，它当时的装货呢，已经装了很多的中国的瓷器。
You can see here that after the ship was loaded with Chinese goods, it then it traveled down and finally was going through Southeast Asia, and in fact it sank right off the coast of this little island here. It's called Belitung Island, and it's right off the coast of Indonesia.
所以呢，在中国呢，这个船呢装了中国的这些大量的瓷器。那在向南开始游的时候，它一直到了这个东南亚的这一个海岛，叫白乐痛岛。在白乐痛岛呢，这个船呢就下沉了。
So how do we know that this ship, because it was filled with all these Chinese objects, originated in the Abbasid Empire? Let's come around to the other side of this wall, and we're going to look at some pictures of a replica boat that shows us how this ship was originally constructed.
我们很想知道这个船它的起源，它起源于阿巴斯的这个皇朝。那这船又是怎么样的呢？那让我们来到这个船的这个模型，可以看到呢，从这些照片上看到这些船呢，当时是如何被制造的。
When the shipwreck was discovered, not only were there pieces of cargo left, but because the ship had sunk in very shallow waters in the silt, actually a lot of the boat, the original boat, was also preserved.
这个船呢，当时下沉的时候呢，这个水并不是特别的深，所以呢，就是除了这些装的这些货以外呢，还可以看到这个船的一个基本的一个样型。
So we found out something really interesting, and that was that the ship was constructed completely without nails and without wooden dowels.
这个船呢，它没有用任何一个钉子。
So you can see in this photograph of a replica that actually the way that the ship was held together was with a cord.
你可以看到呢，这个船的后来的一个恢复的模型中，它的整个的不同的这个部分呢，它是通过这个绳子呢把它绑住的。
And that's what we call in English sewn plank construction. It's a kind of technique of creating ships that originated in the Arab world.
所以呢，这种沉船，这个船当时的一个制造方式呢，是阿拉伯国家的他们专门的一种制造方式。
Another interesting fact is that once they were able to analyze the wood, they discovered that some of the wood actually originated in Africa.
当时呢，他们对这个木头呢就非常有研究。我们可以发现呢，它的这个沉船的木头呢，来自于这个非洲。
So that shows us that there's no question, but this boat originated in West Asia.
所以从这个材质上讲呢，我们知道整个的这个船呢，它的起源于这个西亚。
So let's go into the exhibition now.
我们先去看一下这个展览。
The amazing discovery of the shipwreck was made in 1998.
在1988年的时候呢，这个沉船呢被发现了。
And it was actually made by local Indonesian fishermen who were fishing for sea cucumbers.
当时呢是当地的印度尼西亚的这些海民们、渔民们呢，他们去找海参的时候发现了这个沉船。
So they were fishing for these sea cucumbers and they came across this strange mound of things in the sea. And you can see, this is a piece of shinware, and you can see it's covered with barnacles and all kinds of crustacea. And they found this whole mound of objects like this.
在找这些海参的时候呢，他们发现了很多这样的已经被这个海呢就是吞食过的一些物品，包括这个邢窑的这个瓷器小杯子。
And upon further discovery and exploration, they realized that these were Chinese ceramics, and actually the people started to loot this site.
经过了这个更深的一个发掘和研究呢，他们知道呢，这个是一个大海沉船，沉船上呢有很多的宝贝。那个时候开始呢，就有很多的人呢开始来抢，就是把这些东西呢就挖走了。
And it's because of that that the Indonesian government became aware of this shipwreck, and then they worked with a German salvage company to excavate the shipwreck.
那个时候呢，就是印度尼西亚的政府呢就知道了，在他们的这个岛的边缘呢有这样的一个沉船，他们和一个德国的公司开始对这个整个的沉船的一个再发掘。
After 2 seasons of excavation and then conservation, the Indonesian government sold a large percentage of the cargo from the shipwreck. After 2 seasons of excavation and then conservation, the Indonesian government sold the large percentage of the cargo to Singapore.
经过2个季度的这样的一个发掘，他把大批量的这些沉船的物品呢，就是把它那个卖到了这个新加坡。
Okay, let's move over here.
我们先到那里再去看一下。
And in addition to objects that were clearly for trade and export, like the shinware, there were also a few pieces on the ship, like the ones you're looking at right now, that were for daily use by the crew of the ship.
刚刚看到的那个小杯子呢，是比较特别的。我们还可以看到，在这个船上呢，有很多日常的用品，包括我们现在看到的这两个物件。
So what we're looking at here is a kind of kettle and then probably some kind of a brazier or a lantern that would have been used by the crew.
我们现在看到的是一个壶，在这个右边的话呢，有可能是一个灯笼或者是一个筐子。
The crew we know would have been an international crew because, of course, the ship made many stops as it was doing trade along West Asia, Southeast Asia, Southeast Asia, and China.
我们所知道的，在这个船上的工作人员呢，可能是一个国际的团队，从这个船的起源，从西亚开始，一直到东南亚，再到了中国。
So the crew would change at different ports.
所以在不同的这个海港呢，这个整个的这个工作人员呢，可能会出现一些变动。
At the scene of the shipwreck, there were many storage jars like the one that we're looking at right now discovered.
在这个大海的这个沉船的这个遗址上呢，我们可以已经发现了很多的这些储藏罐子。
These were all containers. Small ones like this one were holding things like spices like star anise.
所以呢，我们知道的这些那个储藏罐子呢，那个时候呢就已经放很多的这些香味。
This one has a small spout, so it may have been holding some kind of liquid.
我们可以看到，在这个罐子上呢有一个小的洞，也就是小的壶口，有可能呢是盛这些饮料的。
If we move into this next gallery,
我们再往的第二个画廊看一下。
this is one of the great masterpieces that was discovered on the shipwreck.
这是在这个沉船上找到的一个非常精彩的一个杰作。
So you can see this is a kind of ewer with a very long neck, which was probably a decorative object because you can see it's really, really large.
你可以看到这个物件呢是非常的长，叫长形壶，
It's
特别的长。
It's about a meter long.
它整个的长度将近于有1米长。
And what's interesting about it is that it has some features that are very Chinese, like this beautiful cover, which is in the shape of a dragon's head. But then there are also other decorations on it that are very, very West Asian.
我们可以看到的整个的这个设计非常的这个国际化，在上面呢看到这个龙头呢就非常的中国式，而在下面所看到的这些呢就比较的西亚的图案。
And particularly when I talk about West Asian or kind of Iran or Iraq kind of popular motif, it's like this triangular, this diamond-shaped form which has leaves coming out of the corners.
所以我们看到的这些西亚的图案呢，您可以看到在这个四方形的外面呢，还有这些非常华丽的这些叶子，这些华丽的叶子呢是西亚的一个图案的一个经典的表现。
So it's very likely that this piece was made by the Chinese potters, particularly for export to Iran or Iraq.
有可能呢是中国的一个对外进口、出口的一个产品，而是出口到伊朗或者伊拉克。
And it's hard to know whether it was special ordered or whether they just made some of these extraordinary pieces for really important trade when they were traveling.
我们很难知道这些是不是定制的，还是他们专门为了这个海上的贸易，或者是一个特别的一个节日去做的。
This is a kind of ware that's called Gongxian ware from Henan province, and I'm going to talk about it a little bit more in a couple of minutes, but first I want to show you some other storage jars.
这样的词呢是来自于河南的巩县窑。随后呢我们也可以看到其他的窑里出来的这些物品。
So over here you can see a couple of really large storage jars. Earlier we looked at that smaller storage jars, but there were also large ones like this one. And these storage jars were used to hold other ceramics.
我们现在看到的两个巨大的这个罐子呢，和刚刚看到的罐子不一样。刚刚看到的罐子呢是属于实用性的罐子，但是呢这两个罐子呢是用来装其他的瓷器的罐子。
All of these storage jars came from Guangdong province.
所以呢，这个罐子呢是来自于广东省。
And you can see right here with this photograph, you can see that this is a broken jar, and that there are many, many bowls inside of it, all kind of in a circular fashion, packed together. They could fit about 50 of those ceramic bowls in one of these jars.
我们现在所看到的是一个破碎的这个罐子，在破碎的壶的罐子里面，已经看到了这些其他的瓷器，它是按照一个圆形的储存方式呢去储存的。
Now in this gallery, we can also see a number of pieces of wares from the Gongxian kilns, which is those same kilns in Henan province that large ewer came from.
我们这里还可以看到河南的这个巩县的窑里出来的这些盘子。
And you can see that these are splashed greenwares. And splashed greenwares were not something that was particularly to the Chinese taste.
我们现在看到的是一个泼墨式的、泼彩式的一个图形。像这种泼彩式的图形呢，并不是中国的一个传统的图形。
And for many years, these kinds of wares have been excavated in Iran and Iraq, and nobody really knew where they originated.
像这样的图形的这些盆子呢，在伊朗和伊拉克呢都有出土发现，但是呢，大家都不知道这些盘子是从哪里来的。
With the discovery of the shipwreck and more than 200 of these flash greenwares on it from Gongxian, they did some analysis and they were able to analyze the clay and the glaze, and they realized that in fact these were wares from the Gongxian kilns in Henan.
自从发现了这个大海沉船中，他所发现的有200多件这样的一个盘子，通过这个科学的检验以后，他们发现也确定了这样的盘子的整个的来源来自于河南的巩县窑。
And so these Gongxian wares come in all kinds of sizes and shapes.
所以呢，巩县窑它出来的这些瓷器呢，各种不同不样。
I think that one of the most fun shapes that was discovered was this one, and this is a kind of stem cup shape.
这里呢所发现的这些这个小罐子呢，它是非常有意思。
And if you look inside of the cup, you can see that there are actually small sculpted fish, and also there's a bird that's actually missing its head because it was broken.
在这个杯子里面，我们可以看到有些小动物在里面，像鱼啊，还有一个缺了一个头的一个小鸟。
And the other thing that's really fascinating about this cup is the small spout that's on the left of the cup.
在这个杯子的旁边呢，还有一个其他的一个凸出来的一个形状。
So with the spout, the cup actually seems to be the shape of a cup that we know there are descriptions of in Song Dynasty text, but nobody ever really knew what they looked like.
这样子的这个杯子的这个形状呢，在关于宋代的杯子的这个描述中呢有写到，但是大家都不知道整个的杯子的具体的形象是怎么样的。
So this seems to be a Tang Dynasty version of what in the Song Dynasty they called a nose drinking cup.
所以呢，这个呢是带了鼻子的一个杯子，也就是说在唐代呢就已经有带了这样的鼻子的这个杯子，但是它的整个的描述呢是在宋代的这些文字中有阐述的。
So apparently there were some people in ancient China who really enjoyed drinking either wine or water through their noses.
所以呢，我们可以看到呢，这个刚刚凸出来的这一个小块呢，其实是用鼻子去喝水。所以呢，可以知道，在中国的这个古代呢，就是有一些古人呢用鼻子喝饮料。
We know from the descriptions that these people found it very pleasant to drink through their noses directly into their throats.
我们可以从这个古代的文字中呢知道，他们用这个鼻子喝饮料而且呢非常的愉快，也非常的开心。
Let's move on now, and we're going into a gallery now that has a number of people a number of objects from the Yue kilns. But before we look at the objects, I wanted to just show you this map, because in red on this map, you can see all the different kiln sites that contributed wares to this ship.
在这里我们可以看到很多越窑，但是呢，我们首先来看一下这个地图，在这个地图上呢展示了不同的这个窑。那这些不同的窑呢，其实代表着这个沉船上的这些瓷器它们的来源，所以它这个瓷器的它这个窑有不同的这个窑。
So you can say there's Ding, there's Xing, there's Gongxian, there's Yue, there's Changsha, Meixian, and Chaozhou kilns that all contributed in a very, very sophisticated network of trade.
所以我们可以看到呢，有定窑、邢窑、巩县窑、越窑、长沙窑、梅县窑、潮州窑。那这些窑呢，在中国的不同的地点，也展示了当时唐代的时候，整个的贸易呢，已经跨到了一个不同的一个提升到一个不同的一个距离和一个阶段。
And it's really interesting that on the ship, not only did we have wares like the Gongxian wares, that those green splash wares that were clearly made specifically for export tastes, but we also had wares like the Yue wares, which traditionally have always been highly esteemed and enjoyed by Chinese population and Chinese collectors also.
我们可以看到呢，刚刚看到的这个巩县的这个窑，刚刚看到的巩县窑呢，在船上能找到，但是在这里我们看到的是越窑，越窑的这些瓷器呢，中国的藏家特别的喜欢，所以呢，可以看到这些越窑呢，也已经在船上了。
The majority of wares on the boat, however, were a kind of ware called changsha ware.
大部分的这些瓷器呢，在船上的呢，是来自于这个长沙窑。
So changsha wares like this ewer that we see in front of us came from Hunan province.
我们看到的这个湖南来自于湖南省。
And then we know a few changsha wares have been excavated in China itself. They were not particularly popular in China.
我们在这个长沙呢，湖南长沙呢，已经发现了不同的这样的这些古址，但是呢，长沙窑呢，并不是特别的流行在中国。
However, we know that these kinds of wares were really popular export wares all over Southeast Asia and also in West Asia. In all these places, these kinds of wares have been found in excavations.
我们所知道呢，现在知道了，这些长沙窑呢，在这个西亚和这个东南亚呢，特别的流行。
And the decoration on this particular ewer and many of these ewers suggests a kind of motif that again probably would have appealed to a West Asian market.
我们所看到的这个窑上的这些图案呢，可能对东南亚特别的流行。
So if we look at this on the very front of this particular piece, you can see that there's a big bow on the top of this kind of medallion that's been impressed onto the ceramic.
我们可以看到呢，这个图形的这个上面呢，有一个大的蝴蝶结。
And then below that are two birds that are facing each other, and then they're sitting on top of what looks like a bunch of palm leaves, palm tree leaves.
在这个图形上，我们还看到了一对可爱的小鸟在这个下面，它们呢是坐在这个棕榈的叶子上面。
So this is probably a date palm.
有可能叫海藻棕榈。
And of course, these are date palms. Are very common in West Asia, in the Arab world.
它可能这样的这个植物呢，在这个西亚呢就特别的流行，在阿拉伯国家呢也可能非常的流行。
So there were probably about 55,000 changsha bowls on the ship, and they came in all different sizes and patterns.
在这个船上可能有55000个这样的这个盘子，但是呢，每个盘子的它里面的图案呢又不一样。
Yeah, you can see a selection of these different kinds of patterns, and they come in floral patterns. And if you look at these three, they're all the same shape, but you can see that they're all painted differently. Each one is hand painted.
我们所看到的，比如说现在的这个一个选的这些花纹呢，有3朵花的花纹，但是这3朵花的花纹的每一个碗呢，它里面的花纹均不一样。
And you also have other kinds of fun decorations like here's a makara or sea monster, and here's a bird flying, and here's a bird standing.
我们还可以看到其他的花纹，比如说海兽的花纹啊，或者是鸟在飞的花纹啊，或者是鸟站立的这个花纹。
And many bowls have this kind of very simple landscape motif, some land in front of them. And some of them are more carefully painted, like this big bowl on the top, and some of them are very rapidly painted, like this one on the bottom.
所以看到的即使是风景图呢，它风景图也不一样。比如上面看到的是3座山的这个风景图，它画的比较细致。那这个下面的这个碗里的这个图呢，就特别的，当时呢，画匠呢画的就特别的快。
So you probably had craftspeople who were of different skills, or also maybe by the end of the day they were getting kind of tired and just doing them as quickly as they could.
有可能这些画匠呢，在画这些山的时候，他们快工作结束了。在这个每日的傍晚的时候呢，他们可能特别的累，就画的呢就比较快。
My favorite of these bowls in the exhibition, though, is this bowl right here, which is a bowl that has calligraphy on it.
在这个展览中，我最喜欢的一个碗呢是这一个碗。在这个碗中呢，可以看到中国的书法。
So many of you may know that the great Tang Dynasty calligrapher Huaisu lived in Changsha.
我们知道呢，在长沙有一个非常重要的中国的书法家叫怀素。
So I think it's quite fascinating that this ceramics craftsman, this decorator, was clearly imitating Huaisu's famous style. He's known for this really kind of wild cursive.
怀素当时是以草书为名，我们可以看到呢，怀素当时就已经很有名气了。这些画匠呢就开始模仿怀素的草书的这些书写形式。
So why was he copying Huaisu's style for a bowl that clearly was going to be exported? Maybe he was just practicing, or maybe he just thought that other people in other countries would also appreciate this beautiful style of calligraphy.
当时呢，这些画匠为什么要去拷贝怀素的呢？我们不是特别的知道，但是呢，我们可以知道这些画匠呢对怀素的这个书法呢充满着一个敬慕和欣赏。
Okay, let's move on now to another type of ware that was also very much to Chinese taste. And like yueware, there were only a couple of hundred pieces of this type of ware on the ship. This is Xingware from the Xing kilns in Hebei province.
我们刚刚看到了不同的窑，刚刚讲到的这个越窑呢，只是几百件，但是呢，在这个船上呢，我们还看到了河北省的邢窑出来的这些瓷器。
So you can see here we actually have an example of a teacup and its stand.
我们可以看到呢，这里是茶杯，那个是茶杯的这个垫子。
They're both really beautifully glazed.
这个整个的烧制呢，它的那个光特别的漂亮。
And the body of the clay is very white. And this is really part of the reason that Chinese ceramics were so popular throughout the world, because Chinese potters were able to create and had access to this very white clay, and it was just highly desirable all over the world because it was so beautiful.
我们所看到的它的胚胎特别的白色，那这个白色呢，也是中国的这个瓷器在世界上出名的一个原因。大家呢都非常喜欢它这样的一个颜色和质体。
And it's also really hard and very thinly potted.
而且呢，它的整个的这个材质呢特别的硬，而且它呢也非常的薄。
This is beyond what other potters have been able to achieve in other countries at this time.
那在唐朝的其他国家的这些同样的制造瓷器的这些匠人呢，就很难能够达到这样的水平。
Another example that we can look at that shows this desirability of white clay in especially West Asian markets is this piece right here, which is actually from the Gongxian kilns.
还有一个呢，就是当时的这些巩县的这些窑出来的这些瓷器呢，已经在这个国际上呢，已经受到了非常的大的一个欢迎。
So you can see that the clay from the Gongxian kilns used was also quite white, and in addition to using that copper green color glaze that we saw earlier, at the Gongxian kilns they were using cobalt blue.
我们可以看到呢，这些就是它的这个盘的底呢是非常的白色的，但是也看到了这个蓝色的这个花纹的一个出现。
Now this cobalt was actually coming from Iran or Iraq, so perhaps that ship may have carried some of the cobalt among other things.
这种蓝呢来自于伊朗和伊拉克，也可能呢当时船上呢就已经装了这样的颜料了。
And so you have the Chinese potters who are making a pattern. Again, you see this kind of diamond-shaped pattern with those leaves coming out of it that are very, very popular in West Asia and Iran, Iraq.
我们所看到的这个图像呢，是一个钻石形的图像，在这个钻石形的图像的边缘和内部呢，有一些树的叶子。这种图像在西亚呢就特别的流行。
So this seems that it was probably a special pattern that was ordered by patrons in West Asia from the Gongxian kilns.
这有可能是这个西亚的这个客人特地向巩县的这个他们的窑烧制定。
And so we know that this type of pattern has been found on ceramics, particularly from Basra in Iraq. When it's created in cobalt blue in that region originally, it was created on a very kind of tan or buff-colored ceramic. But when they saw the beautiful white ceramics that could be produced in China, they really liked the way that this blue looked against the white color of the clay.
在这个伊朗或者伊拉克的时候呢，他们有自己的这种青色的这个盘，但青色的这个盘呢，我们看到的它这个盘的底的颜色呢没有这么的白。当他们看到的这个蓝色和这个白色的一个完美的结合呢，就对这样的一个呈现呢充满着一个热情。
So even though they couldn't achieve this kind of white-colored clay, or they didn't have access to this kind of white-colored clay in Iraq, the potters there started to coat their ceramics with a white coating and then paint the cobalt blue on top in imitation of the Chinese wares.
虽然呢，他们那里呢没有这样的一个白色的这种泥土，就是把它烧成这样的白色，但是呢，他们在他们的瓷器上呢就涂了一层白色，随后呢再放上这样的蓝色。
So this is this amazing kind of back and forth exchange going on between potters in China, in Tang Dynasty China, and in Abbasid Iraq.
所以我们看到了，虽然在唐朝距离非常远。阿巴斯皇朝的这些工匠呢，和唐朝的这些工匠呢，就已经开始了进行一定的交流。
And something even more amazing about this ceramic is that until the discovery of this shipwreck, which had 4 of these full plates on it with the blue and white decoration, we had no complete existing examples of blue and white ceramics.
一直到现在呢，我们才发现了这个就是青白的在唐朝的这样的一个呈现。在这之前呢，一直没有发现。
So now we know for sure that there's this production of blue and white, which relates to an exchange between China and West Asia, which predates the Yuan dynasty blue and white porcelains by hundreds of years.
所以呢，整个的这个现在从这样的发现中呢，可以看到，早在唐朝，远远的在这个元朝的青白瓷器之前呢，整个的西亚和中国呢就已经开始进行了这个青白瓷的一个交流。
All right, let's move on from ceramics to some of the other wares that were discovered on the ship. And these include, over here, some Tang period mirrors.
我们再看了一下在船上发现的其他的这些东西，再看到的这里呢是青铜的这个镜子。
Here we have examples that have decoration of bird and flowers and lions and grapevines. And these are very, very typical Tang period designs. And there were enough of these mirrors on the ship that we know that they were probably also for export rather than by use of the crew.
我们再看到这4个镜子的它所表现的这些图案呢，是非常典型的唐朝的图案。可以知道，当时呢已经把这些镜子呢运到了这些海外。
One of the mirrors from the shipwreck actually has a date on it as well, and that also helps us to date the date of the shipwreck. So it's from around the same period, the middle of the 8th century.
所以呢，就是我们可以知道，在这个9世纪的中期呢，其中还有发现了一个镜子，那个镜子上面呢还写着这个日子。这个日子呢，让我们知道它的整个的制作呢，在于9世纪的中期。
And then finally, I want to show you some pieces of gold and silver that were discovered in the shipwreck. These are also some of the most extraordinary finds in this shipwreck.
我们看一下这个在船上发现的这些金银器，现在看到的这个金盘呢，是船上发现的一个非常精彩的一个金盘。
So here's a really beautiful example. It's actually one of a pair of these small square plates that's decorated with designs of flowers and insects like butterflies and cicadas.
在这个金盘中，我们可以看到这个图案呢，充满着这个花纹，有这些不同的花纹，还有呢这些蝴蝶结啊等等。
This piece that has this design full of good wishes is crafted in a way that is so extraordinary. It's of the quality of wares that we associate with imperial gold and silver in China in this period.
在这个花纹中呢，您看到这些图案都非常的吉祥，像这么精彩的这个花纹和这个工艺呢，我们经常把这些工艺同这个中国的这个皇室的这个工艺呢，结合在一起。
We know that wares of this quality, gold and silver of this quality, was being crafted in Yangzhou.
我们所知道的这些工艺呢，是来自于中国的扬州。
And so we think it's actually pretty likely that that's where these wares were created because it's right on a port. But we don't really quite understand what the pieces were doing on the ship. There were only about 15 of them, and they seem to have been hidden in part of the ship in the hull.
之所以我们觉得是扬州呢，因为这个船呢到了扬州，所以我们觉得这些是从扬州来的。那么呢，在这个船上我们发现的这些金银器呢，并不是很多，大概在10几件左右，而且都已经被藏在一个地方。
We can only guess whether they were special ordered by a patron, or maybe the captain of the ship needed to use them to pay to allow him to set port at particular ports as he was traveling, or it's possible that they were even used to entertain like kings who had the first choice of goods on the ship.
也有可能呢，这些精致的这些金银器呢，是给船长的，也可能船长招待他的客人，也可能呢是给当地的一些客户，他们到了一个国家，那么他可能把这些最好的这些物件呢，先送给这个国王，就是先送给当地的皇室看。
So this gives you a pretty good sense of the variety of cargo that were found with this shipwreck. And I think that part of the reason that this ship, which was actually quite a small ship, it was only about 30 meters long, was carrying over 70,000 items. So it's very very plentiful, active period. This period in the middle of the 9th century.
所以在9世纪的中期，我们看到这个船呢，虽然非常小，大概只有30米长，但是它在船上所装的这些物件呢，达到了7万多件。我们刚刚看到的不同的从瓷器到金银器和不同的这些物件，可以看到，虽然船小，但是整个的一个贸易的这个物品啊，已经达到了一个非常的复杂的一个工艺和非常多的一个量。
And we know that looking at Chinese history is that actually the emperor had put forward a special edict that asked ports to open to international ships around 829.
所以我们可以知道，从这个皇室当时下令呢，在829年的那个时候呢，皇帝呢下令要把这个海边的这些海湾的这些贸易港口呢向对外开放，就是国际化。
But then, about 50 years later, the rebel Huang Chao actually caused a lot of upheaval and destruction in the port of Guangzhou.
所以在50年以后呢，广州的这个海口呢，就有很多的这些暴乱。
And as a result of that, many people were killed. These were ports with foreigners from all over. A lot of buildings were destroyed, and because of all of this destruction and havoc, the ports were closed again.
所以呢，由于这样的暴乱呢，很多的这个不和平呢，给这些国际的这些贸易带来了一定的阻碍。过了不久呢，这些开放性的那个港口呢又封闭了。
So we feel so fortunate to have the discovery of this shipwreck, and also to have these examples from the shipwreck here on View at Asia Society, because for us it's a little time capsule of this really important period of trade in China's history.
所以呢，我们就非常有幸的在这个大海沉船里看到了这唐朝的这个辉煌的艺术和历史，也看到了当时的一个早期的亚洲的一个之间的贸易，就像在这个大海中，我们发现了一个过去，这个过去呢迎接在这个沉船上。Thank you so much.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
So, 那这样现在呢，我们要去另外一个展示。亚洲协会呢做了一个特别的展览，是关于唐朝的艺术的展览。
Yeah, so let's go and see that exhibition.
我们现在去看那个展览。
So this exhibition is called Art of the Tang Dynasty, and it's just a few selected pieces from Asia Society's own collection, the Mr. and Mrs. John D. Rockefeller collection.
这个展览呢是唐朝的艺术展，所展出呢是来自于洛克菲勒的这个家族的他们的收藏中的一些唐朝的这个唐代艺术的一个精品。
So I think it's really nice to have this show on view together with the other show, especially for our American visitors who don't know a lot about Chinese history, because we're able to show them, for example, some great pieces of sansai, ceramics, funerary wares.
对于美国的观众呢，有这样的一个展览呢，非常的重要。我们刚刚看到了一个唐代的一个沉船展，在这个同时呢，特别是对美国的观众，他们可以了解这个唐代的艺术的一个历史。
So these pieces are actually from at least about 100 years before the shipwreck pieces that we were looking at before. And we know that, that these pieces, that funerary wares and big funerary processions in China for wealthy people were very, very popular up until the time of the Anushan Rebellion in 755.
所以呢，所看到的这些出土文物呢，它比刚刚的那些发掘呢要更早100年。那这些出土文物呢，它展示了中国人的这个幕后的一个，就是他未来的就是一个就是死亡以后的一个生活。
And many kilns were producing these sansai wares, including the Gongxian kilns.
所有的就是当时呢，已经有很多的窑呢，已经开始在做出土文物了，包括巩县窑。
But after the Anushan Rebellion, people were required to or asked to not spend as much money on these enormous funerary processions because they were draining the economy.
当时呢有一个起义，在这个起义之后呢，就是他们改变了整个的一个出土文物的一个，也不是出土文物，也就是说，在这个墓地的它的这些陪葬品的一个量让大家呢能够更加节省，而不是把钱呢用到这些陪葬品中去。
And that means that then these kilns were not receiving as many orders. So it's quite interesting that the Gongxian kilns, for example, then started to produce wares, especially for export.
所以我们看到呢，本来的巩县窑呢，也就是做很多的这些陪葬品，但是由于这个起义呢，它的整个的这个经济呢，不是特别的鼓动这些大户人家呢去做大量的陪葬品。那也就可以看到巩县的窑呢，已经开始收一些外来的定制，在刚刚在左边的这个展览中所看到的。
All right. I'd also like to just take a quick look at this piece of black glazed ware.
我们看一下这个黑釉的这个小碗。
This is a special kind of ceramic that would have been used for preparation and drinking of tea.
这个呢，它的这个器皿呢是用于茶道。
And it was probably used when you were making tea for depositing the water, when you were cleaning the teacup.
这个有可能呢就是它是渗水的，当时在喝茶的时候呢，要把喝茶的这些器皿呢洗一遍。
Rinsing out old tea leaves.
也可能把这些旧的这些茶的叶子呢给洗一下。
It's the Tang period in China is of course the period when tea drinking became very, very popular, and the number of tea-shaped ceramics that were found in the shipwreck, that we see in general, coming down to us through the ages, reflects this interest in tea drinking in the Tang Dynasty.
所以在唐朝呢，这个饮茶的文化特别的流行。刚刚在这个沉船的展中，我们就可以看到很多喝茶的器皿，在这里呢也是一个非常精致的一个器皿。
And then let's take a look over here at one more piece that's in the show. In our collection here at Asia Society, we have this really beautiful Tang Dynasty mirror. It dates to around the 8th century, and you can see that it's particularly exquisite.
我们看到的，在我们这个收藏里的是一个铜镜，这个镜子呢就特别的美丽，它是来自于8世纪的一个唐代的镜子。
Like some of the mirrors that we were looking at earlier, it's also decorated with birds and flowers. But in this case, the birds and flowers are depicted using inlays of silver and gold.
我们看到的，刚刚就看到了这个唐代的这个金银器的表现。那在这里看到的也是同样的花和鸟，但这样的花和鸟呢，它是一个镶嵌型的金和银在一起。
So that gives you a little bit of sense of some of the objects that we have in our collection here at Asia Society, and it's been just a real pleasure to go on this tour with you, and I hope if any of you are ever in New York, you'll come to Asia Society. We always have some exciting exhibitions from our permanent collection and also big loan exhibitions here.
我们刚才看到的呢是亚洲协会的一些这两个展览中的一些非常精彩的小部分的作品，欢迎大家呢来参观亚洲艺术这个亚洲协会的艺术博物馆。在这里呢，我们有很多的展览，每年都举行不同的展览。
谢谢。
Thank you so much. Thank you. 谢谢。